do the right thing, even if others don't. I think that's one of the great pitfalls in life. And it can happen in family relationships. It can happen in business. That when other people behave in an inappropriate way, we somehow can fall into a trap of giving ourselves permission to act in an inappropriate way ourselves.
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, welcome back. This is the Uncommon Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Gallagher, and I've got a fantastic guest for you today. I'm very grateful to be able to call this gentleman a friend, Barry Sutlive, who's the founder and CEO of Reliable Roofing in Georgia, and I can't wait to get a chance to talk with him about his story. One of the things we'll talk about today is from when he started this organization with $100 in his pocket, and today as it sits as a multi-million-dollar organization. And while that's a very important part of the journey for Barry as the CEO of a company, what I really appreciate in our friendship and our conversation today is how he is committed to living out his purpose, his God-given talents and gifts inside of his organization and his life that I think are going to be inspiring and encouraging for all of us to listen to today. So, Barry, welcome to the Uncommon Leader Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, again, looking forward to our conversation. So many things about your business, and I got all kind of questions to talk about, but I always start my first time guests with the same first question, asking you to tell me a story from your childhood that still impacts who you are today as a person or as a leader.
Yeah, you did give me a heads up that you'd be asking that question. So I thought about it a lot, and there's a lot of places I could go with it, but I think probably I think like so many people, you start back with your parents and they form so much of who we are. And even whether the things are tough or the things are easy, it forms who you are. So I think about my father was a foot soldier as an 18-year-old with his first assignment being the Battle of the Bulge.
Mm.
And how that molded him and his personality and his just way at looking at life. And I think in some ways that were a challenge, but in other ways that were super positive. Dad came back from the war, spent 1 year in college, and then went and worked for a corporation, which he ended up working there 40 years. And he started in the factory. And when he left after 7 moves, he was in New York running the entire 23
Mm.
plants of the company. So he was willing to sacrifice, and he worked hard, and he also stuck with stuff. So I think that had a big influence on me. I think also my mother just realizing what she went through and trying to move 7 different times was a lot of resilience there and a lot of sacrifice that she demonstrated. And there were 6 kids. And so it was not an easy thing, but I think so I'm really grateful to both of them. There was a lot of trials in the life. I had a brother who passed away at age 7 and brought a lot of pain into the family, and so that sort of shaped some of the childhood too. There was a lot of wounds that came out of that were he did pass away before I was born, but it just impacted the family greatly, and some of that manifests itself later. But I think the beauty of moving a lot for me was that I got to hone my skills in meeting new people and also maybe reading people and understanding, like, how do you see what's going on in a new and different situation. And I think that's been very helpful. And I think my parents has been role models for how to push through with a lot of different change has been very helpful.
Mm. Barry, I love that. And I think about those 6 moves reminds me a good bit of even some of our journey. I cannot imagine with 6 kids. I know that we moved as a newly married couple 3 times before we settled into Virginia twice. And then even in Virginia had 11 different addresses within 17 years, never leaving the zip code. So those moves can be challenging on
Yes, they
family
can.
dynamics, no doubt about it. But with 6, I can't imagine
Yeah.
how that even tries to flow. So, and I think that again, that even frames a little bit then some of that grit that your father had to go from the shop floor up into running the company is something that you guys started on as well. I love the story. And full disclosure, Barry and I have worked together now for a little over a year on some of the consulting that I do. And as I got a chance to know him, I knew that I wanted him to be a guest on the Uncommon Leader podcast to share his story. But one of the stories that I hadn't heard before was really the ultimate startup of Reliable Roofing, where you started with $100 in your pocket 35 years ago and ultimately have led it to the success that it is today with hundreds of employees and or hundreds of people impacted as well, many more impacted. That's an incredible story of grit in and of itself. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome early in that journey to get where you are today?
Yeah, I think the beauty of being 25 years old and starting a business and having this idea is that you don't know what you don't know. Because had I known what some of those challenges would be, I might not have done it because there was a lot of pain. And I think any entrepreneur watching this is like, yes, they can totally relate to that. But we were encouraged early on. The business was started out of an apartment with $100. It's actually an interesting story we like to share because my wife actually lived in an apartment. She was my girlfriend at the time, and she lived in an apartment below me. And I had borrowed her typewriter when she came home from work and found out to type up a flyer. And she asked me what I was doing, and I told her I was going to start a roofing company. Her response was a very dramatic, "Oh my gosh, you need to get a job." I like,
I need to get a job.
you got it. Yeah, you have a few problems. You don't have any capital. You really know a little bit about roofing material. You don't really know roofing, and you don't have a ladder. And that's probably going to be a problem. So, but I did have some crews to work with. And 38 years ago, it wasn't common. There's a lot of people in the roofing business, it seems like today, but 38 years ago, it was a little different world in the roofing business. Most of the roofers who were doing well were former roofers and not as much business people who had decided they would get into the roofing business, with some exceptions. But anyway, my wife quickly got on board and became a huge cheerleader for the business and was instrumental in those early years. But it's funny as we look back on it, and it was a risky proposition.
Well, there's so many things there. I mean, again, if you'd have known then what you know now, you might not have started it. It's risky to start a business with $100 in your pocket. It's even more outlandish, maybe, to start a roofing company without a ladder. Okay, so here
Yeah,
we go with some of
yeah,
the things that you've overcome in your journey. And there's many things that you've talked about, as you move through that journey to today. You ultimately build a company with what I've seen in your notes of three T's: teamwork, trust, and timeless values. So I want to start with those timeless values where we are. I mean, it's something that it really drew me to you in terms of understanding. Tell me a little bit about how you establish those values in your organization. Maybe it's part of who you were as you grew up as well, and how those values continue to drive who you are today in your business.
and my values have grown over the years. But when I started, one thing that I was confident in was that people needed someone they could trust to do their roofing. That there was the process of getting it done, but that a service like roofing was, after the job was done, the warranty and the what happens over the next few years is every bit as important as what happens right when you're doing the job because of the weather. So really, it was all about being trustworthy, and it was about honoring, being honest with our customers, and honoring them, and doing everything you can do to make their experience good. And the company and original values were based on the acronym trust. I did that early on, and the trust stood for teamwork, respect, understanding. The idea of understanding, seek first to understand, then be understood, just really understanding what the customer wanted. Service, providing them what they wanted, and after you've listened to them and heard what they wanted, to provide that service. And then transformation, and the idea that those processes really transform relationships, like this idea of working together and respecting one another, hearing one another, serving one another, it's a transformed relationships. So that was my idea early on, was like that we would build it on the company on trust. And you see that common where people are like honest, trustworthy, whatever. But and nobody's we really worked hard on always honoring our customer, the trust that was bestowed upon us by our customers. And even to this day, as you know, we work all over the country practically, with only locations in physical location, Florida and Georgia. And it's an interesting concept of how people in Michigan, big customers, these are we work in Boston sometimes, and in Dallas or wherever we're working. there's a lot of roofing contractors between our home office and those places, but why did they choose us? In a lot of cases, it's because they trust us, and we don't
Hmm.
ever want to do anything to betray that trust.
Well, I know I've had a chance to meet with a few of your customers in the time we've been together, and there's no doubt that relationship and that trust that's been built over the years is something that is foundational to your success. And I love the use of the acronym trust. I was another thing. That's two things now I wasn't aware of that you
Hmm.
had there: the teamwork, respect, understanding, service, and transformation. And for me, even the word that came to mind as you talked about it was integrity. I think about doing the right thing, even though it may cost a little bit more than you're willing to pay, or sometimes a lot more than you're willing to pay. You mentioned how you've done that with customers. Can you think of a story where you had to actually go above and beyond, where it cost your company more than you really wanted it to, but you needed to maintain that trust with a customer?
Yeah, this comes up all the time. You can imagine that, where there's examples all the time where there's some kind of problem with a roof that may not have manifested itself even in time. If we, for instance, have a 5-year warranty on a roof, it may be 6 or 7 years, and we see something that was actually something that was not correct in the first place, that we will go ahead and correct that, even though it doesn't, we don't technically legally owe that, but we try to do the right thing.
Hmm.
I guess probably one of the biggest examples of that was a big O that we found in Savannah, Georgia, where we had done a property, and I think it was possibly a year or so later when they were asking us. We'd done about 50,000 square feet of roofing on this apartment complex, and for some reason they didn't notice till the following year that it was the wrong color, and it was a calamity of errors of how that happened. And obviously it wasn't too clear to anyone, which is why it took them a year to discover it. But that was a big one where we had to go back and say, okay, we'll take care of it. We replaced the entire 50,000 square feet of roofing for them to make the color right. Yeah. So
Wow.
that one's kind of legendary in the reliable roofing history.
That would be
So
legendary, 50,000 square
yeah,
feet worth, absolutely.
yeah,
And fixing that problem. And definitely, again, definitely a sign that I could understand how that would build trust with your customer base overall, because those words get around too.
yeah,
Small Merle, you're in 35 states now in terms of providing the work that you do now. Back then, maybe you weren't, but either way, that's still a small community where some of those words get around as to how
yeah,
you're servicing those customers becomes
yeah.
a big part of it.
And the customer worked with us to give us some other work to try to soften the blow of that. They were appreciative of that. But the main thing is doing the right thing. I had a mentor early on who would encourage me to get at least a $250,000 reserve, which was laughable back then, because he was adamant about it. Like, you need to build this reserve, build a reserve, build a reserve. Because he said, I know you want to do the right thing, but if you don't handle your finances well, you may find yourself in a lot of situations where you'd actually like to do the right thing, but you have to argue about it or not do it because you don't have the financial capability of doing it. So that's been part of our approach with the business too, and really managing our finances well, is trying to keep ourselves in a position to where where the lack of funds doesn't creep into a lack of character.
Hmm. Barry, we could talk entrepreneurship a lot of the time through. Another characteristic of Barry Sutlive that I love is the I'll use the word balance. I don't know that it's a great word, but certainly the fact that you have the ability, and you might judge yourself. I'll let you talk to it here in a minute. You've been married for 36 years to your wife. You have a large family. You have hobbies that you like to do. You're a golfer. You have sports that you like, and you are involved in your community as a trustee for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, chairman of the Young Leaders International. How do you balance all of those things in your leadership style? The demands of running a multi-million-dollar business with the need to add value to others outside of work as well.
Yeah, and I don't, as you said, balance is an illusion, right? Like,
Hmm.
you're never going to have perfect balance with things. But I think two things. The first I would want to say is just the team that we have here at Reliable Roofing is just some really great people. We built the business with this idea that we need to create an environment where people can reach their God-given potential, We need to create that entrepreneurial environment where people can reach their God-given potential. And if we don't do that, then they should leave when we should want them to leave. But I don't really like people to leave because I really care about people. And we had some great people. My right-hand man has been with me for 33 years. Is an amazing person who's got, honor, integrity, responsibility, hard work, and done a fantastic job. I had a right-hand woman who just retired, who was there with the company for 36 years, who also had just a ton of integrity and support. And then we have a lot of other folks who've been more than 25 years with the business that are just quality, solid people. And so without them, it's not even possible. Right, without the team. So that's the team. When the teamwork, it's not even remotely possible, because it's really largely true that they built the business. I led it and had some vision, some ideas, whatever. But those are the men and women that made it happen. So that's part of it. But then the other piece is putting first things first. And I don't claim to have done this perfectly at all. We raised 4 sons. You can just sports and all that kind of stuff. You can only imagine the time schedules, especially being an entrepreneur. But to keep reminding myself to put God first, like to put God first. Once you get your head right around that, it's then that puts perspective on everything. And then family, my wife, and then my family. And so early on, there was some real intentionality that I had around limiting the hours I would work. For instance, I started in 1998 with saying after 6 o'clock, I'd make every intention to be home by 6. Now, that was at that time, that was a stretch to say that. And I didn't always do it, but putting that boundary in there made me much more effective up until 6. And I'd go home and be around the family and go to bed for a few hours and wake up and do bids in the middle of the night and whatever it took to get the job done. But I had that as a priority, and I didn't want to miss my children's childhood, and I didn't. So I think if I could just sum that up, it would be having the right priorities, and then those things will fall into place. If you sort of seek God first, then the rest will fall into place.
Hey, listeners, I want to take a quick moment to share something special with you. Many of the topics and discussions we have on this podcast are areas where I provide coaching and consulting services for individuals and organizations. If you've been inspired by our conversation and are seeking a catalyst for change in your own life or within your team, I invite you to visit 𝐁𝐮𝐫𝐴LLAGHER.com/free call to sign up for a free coaching call with me. It's an opportunity for us to connect, discuss your unique challenges, and explore how coaching or consulting can benefit you and your team. Okay, let's get back to the show. Of that, seek God first, but also, again, putting those other things in your calendar first as well after that time. I know that it won't be perfect. I mean, there's seasons in an entrepreneur's life, there's seasons in a business leader's life where you have to be investing a significant amount of time in your business. But when you can have those priorities first, 4 children, a wife, God, those are the right ones to have. And now grandchildren for you as well. Very important. Speaking of those values, Romans 12 plays a significant role in your company's values. How have you, practically integrated those principles into your business on a daily basis?
Yeah. Well, so for those of your listeners who don't know know much about Romans 12, it was a letter written to the Romans. I think maybe Paul wrote it from prison. I know Paul wrote it, if I remember correctly, but he describes a lot about the theologies that he's discussing with the Romans, but then he does a background on that, and then in Romans 12 he says in a chapter, and I'd highly recommend anybody go read it and digest it, but he says, now here is how you're supposed to live. And that became a life chapter to me in 1989 when I became a believer and had a faith for the first real time in my life. This is a life chapter. Is that this shows you, and it's a really beautifully written, and I took it, and shortly thereafter took it and put it into 12 directives that I believe would help us live out that trust acronym in our values. So this was really the behaviors that would support the trust acronym. They're really rich, and at Reliable Roofing, you don't have to have a faith to work here. We don't think any different of you. we're wide open to that, and people of all faith. There's no theocracy here at the company,
Hmm.
but people understand my faith, and that I'm attempting to do a good job at walking that out. Not always, sometimes better than others, but the very first R12 directive is it all belongs to God. But I always explain to during our meetings, if this comes up, or to new hires or whatever, that doesn't mean you have to have a faith and you have to even believe in God. Maybe we'll start with that, but by saying that's a stewardship issue. Like, we're all stewards of whatever we're doing. We're stewards of our lives. We're stewards of our children. We're stewards of the properties that we have. We're not going to have them forever. Like, everything's almost a temporary assignment when we're the leader, and we're going to be in charge of them. But for those who do have a faith, we understand that the perspective that you gain with when you truly just say, you know what, he owns it all. There's such freedom in that. Even right now, as you and I were talking, but right before the show, the tariffs, worldwide tariffs, are hitting everyone. We're all business people. We're invested in different
Hmm.
businesses. This is just really a lot of chaos going on. We step back and take a deep breath and understand God owns it all. Whatever happens here, we trust him. We do need to do what we need to do. We need to take action and do whatever. That doesn't mean we sit back and do nothing. But at the end of the day, we're going to be all right.
I love that, Barry, and I love that, like a reset. I mean, it's a calibration,
It
because
is.
if we watch the news and all that stuff going on in the chaos, fear will set in on all sides in terms of what's
Right.
happening. We just don't know, the stock market going down so low, the news telling us, who's bad and who's good, and all these different things. And when we have a chance to step back and say it all belongs to him, is really powerful when we
Yeah.
can have that perspective, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's a truth, and that's the thing. The truth sets you free. It just is it is. It's not a platitude. It's just true that you can, when you rest on things that are true, and I think right now, with just the world in general, with the news cycle, and it is designed to make you afraid. It is designed to breed fear, because fear attracts eyeballs, and that's what they're trying to
Yes.
do, is capture eyeballs. And we can kind of get addicted to it. And whatever side of the political aisle you're on, you can just argue and get all worked up about what the other side's doing and how disastrous it's going to be, and they feed that. But it's always good to put it back, to have a true north and a center that says, all right, this is not, I'm a steward of what I'm supposed to be a steward of. I'm going to do the best that I can do, and then after that, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to honor him and trust him, and there's tons of freedom in that.
Well, I love that in terms of saying too, and we're not going to sit around. We're going to take action from it. We're not going to wait to see what happens to us. We're going to
Right.
recognize that God expects us to be a light to shine for others in our actions, not just in our thoughts, and what
Yes.
we do. And I think that epitomizes really, Barry, what you're doing with your business. You're 35 years into, or more now, into the business of reliable roofing. For all measures, you've had a very successful company, yet you've come to us over a year ago and said, and I want to do better. We talked about the framework of developing self, developing your team, or developing others, implementing new structures and processes, ultimately what leads to sustainable success, kingdom impact, as we've often talked about it. But what was the catalyst for you to say, we're doing okay now and I want to do more, I want to do better?
Yeah, there's a few catalysts to it. Some of it is just my age and realizing that I need to really shore up the foundation of everything that is in the business if I want it to continue. That I don't know that my years are I'm certainly on the short end of the years of how long I'll be here, and having the opportunity to improve it and make it as sustainable as possible was important to me, that for the future. I also have had more time. The kids are out of the house. There's some of the demands are still big, but some of them, the day-to-day demands of when you had four sons have changed dramatically. The other part is that our industry's changed and the world has changed, and everybody's experiencing this consolidation of there's like this money machine out there that is gobbling up every business and entity to have those assets producing returns for them, and that's okay. That's their job and that's their business, but they're also doing that in the roofing industry. Major suppliers are being purchased, our customers are being purchased, and our competitors are being purchased. So so we need to be in our best, be the best version of ourselves, to just position ourselves and to be a great competitor in those environments. and to serve our customers. And, our intentions are to continue just to serve our customers as personally and as honestly as possible. And while the world is changing with who owns what, and what the world is changing with artificial intelligence, and I'm a proponent of using that wherever it's possible to still value people, but to bring efficiencies. But what we're really going to focus on at Reliable is the stuff that doesn't change. We're going to change. That's valuing people and being honest with people and serving them and trying to meet their needs and putting them above yourselves, and trying to be a good friend and a good vendor and a good employer to our employees, and a good contractor to our contractors, and that kind of stuff. So those things will never change. People will always want those kind of things, and those are where we're trying to focus on, the things that won't change.
Excellent. We to be commended for that. I mean, oftentimes, especially on the entrepreneurial side, I believe that folks can be seduced by success and just kind of keep riding it along there. But you've made a hard choice to do hard things to make it even better. And I love the discussion you talk about in terms of your team. You mentioned that person, that's your right-hand person, has been there for almost as long as you have on that journey. You have many 25-year employees in your organization, and you like to keep it that way. The team is something that's very important to you. Is there a time that you were most proud of your team and what they were able to accomplish?
We've been through a lot. If you think about the time since 1987, we started in 87. There was a stock market crash in October of 87. That was a lot. In 1990, there was a big recession that was really damaging to the roofing business. A lot of people went out of business with that in that time. We had the dot-com bomb in 2000. We had 9/11 in 2001, which just shook everyone in the economy. We had the great economic reset in 2007 that just devastated the housing industry. There was and there's been other things along the way, but of course we had COVID in 2020. And I would say the COVID response by far, we've been through so many hurricanes, like the business has been through a lot of challenges. The COVID response by far was what just endeared me to the people in this business in a new way. Scary times. We were having a meeting on March 13th of 2020, offsite meeting with the leadership team at a remote workplace, and they said we're closing down. And the word came out that day, we're closing down. And my right-hand man that I was mentioning earlier, who was coughing maybe a little bit that day, I don't know, but within 7 days, he was in the hospital with a severe case of COVID. One of the first hospitalized people, couldn't really talk, and low oxygen, just really in a rough spot, and just the instrumental key to this business. And obviously the world shutting down. We roof apartment complexes primarily, and they're shutting everything down. So we know our apartment owners aren't going to get their rent. And we know that these entities all stand on their own, these individual entities. And we have roofing work, but if they don't get their rent and they can't pay their bills, then this is a matter. We don't know how long this is going to last, but so it's uncertain as it was for everyone. But our team came together, and we jumped all in technology and brought in some new technology, and I just can't tell you some people stayed in the office. A lot became remote workers for us at the time, and have since come back. But the bravery of the project management team and the sales team and the crews to go out when everybody else was staying home. We were essential workers, and we had to keep working, and they did. And we went into some tough places, like we were up in Virginia, where there was very fearful outbreaks, and everyone was at home. And some of our senior living places were saying, "I need you to roof these." They had some mid-rises that were senior living, like these roofs are leaking, and these residents are in their homes. They're in their rooms by themselves, and we need these roofs done. And with great fear and anxiety with the families of the people who worked here, for their families to be leaving the house and coming back in, our team did it. And we thrived. We had with our mask on, we had on our mask, "Time to Shine." Was on had our mascot, our Rufus, the gorilla that has Roof US, and with a thing that said "Time to Shine." And I can say I could not be prouder of the collaborative effort and the way the team came and sacrificially for their fellow workers, so that they'd have a job, and also just for the senior living residents and just the company at large, and for their own families. They were. I would not say they weren't afraid. Some were more afraid than others, but they went to work, and I don't think we'll ever top that one in my mind.
I mean, to talk all the way through those years and the different things, that the ebbs and the flows that, many businesses have gone through. I mean, your story is not that dissimilar from others, but to hear that from the story of losing, or not losing, but certainly having one of your top leaders be so affected from it from a physical standpoint, to be ready. And I know, talking with him, today, he still remembers that all too well in terms of what he went through. Maybe still suffering from some of that today, physically, that's happening. To have your team rally around that and to make ultimately work that needed to be done to keep folks safe and to keep them in their homes as well, realizing that the cash may not be there for you. Again, goes back to that trust that you've built over time with your business and that acronym, and how it makes so much sense. Barry, what's like the future for you? What are you learning right now that excites you, and what are you looking forward to?
I think just helping people grow and using the platform that I have been given over having a business that has turned out to be a pretty successful business. There's been many times over the years where we weren't sure where it was going to make it, so it's been far from a smooth road. But to use that to help people, to help them grow, to speak into their lives, to teach them things that I've learned along the way, and to encourage them to serve their customer. That's the biggest thing that I would say along the way. Serve others. The world constantly tells you that the key to success and the key to getting ahead is to focus on you, and that you deserve a break and you deserve more, and you should not have people telling you this or doing that. Whatever it is, it's this you, or me kind of focus. The problem with it is it doesn't work. It doesn't. The more focused you really are on you, the more unhappy you'll be, and the less the rest piece you'll really ultimately have. We're important. Each individual person is important. It's not dismissing yourself. It's just valuing others and realizing that becoming men and women who are built for others is really a great way to having a peaceful, productive, meaningful life that will also benefit you greatly, much more so than sort of being centered as what's in it for me.
The name of the podcast is The Uncommon Leader. Barry, that's an uncommon response in terms of others focused versus self focused. We know it's biblical. We're told to love others, love our neighbors. We are told to serve and not be served, as Jesus came to this earth to serve and not be served. Love kind of that approach, and it is an uncommon approach. I could keep going and going, and I want to honor our time commitment that we had here, Barry. The stories that you've shared, the wisdom that you shared, I know is going to add value to the folks of the Uncommon Leader podcast. And I appreciate the time that you've invested. I want to give you that last one that I set you up for as well, that last question that gives you the last word on the podcast. I'm going to give you a billboard. You can put it anywhere you want to. You're going to put a message on that billboard for others, to serve others. What's the message that you put on there, and why?
Yeah, I would say there's a few of our 12 directives we didn't really get to talk about there's 12 of them, but the gratitude is one and humility is one. But I think one of my favorites is the idea that I would probably put on the billboard is do the right thing, even if others don't.
Even if
I
others
think
don't.
that's even if others don't. I think that's one of the great pitfalls in life. And it can happen in family relationships. It can happen in business. That when other people behave in an inappropriate way, and somehow and that can even be parents when we're children, whatever it is, there can be when other people behave in an inappropriate way, we somehow can fall into a trap of giving ourselves permission to act in an inappropriate way ourselves. And like amongst the Christian peer group, we're like, what we're really saying when we do that is that person is Lord. He's not Lord. If you're, but if you're not a person of faith, just in general, don't let someone else's bad behavior let you fall into the trap of having bad behavior yourself. Do the right thing, even if they did. That's just, and there's a ton of freedom. So all of these values and the things you just shared about what the ancient wisdoms that are in the Bible and the teaching there's a lot in there for anyone of any faith, but they're all designed to make our lives better and more peaceful and more personal, and they're like guardrails. So I think that'd be one I'd have to put on there, and hope people would attempt to adhere to it, because it's a lot easier to say it than it is to do it.
That is so true as well. It's
Yeah.
easier to say. And Barry, I know you've been a model for that and understanding that and all that I've heard about you. And again, I wish you the best. I appreciate you investing the time with the listeners of the Uncommon Leader podcast. Maybe we'll do this again and we'll walk down deep into each one of those R12 principles and really understand those deeper. I'm going to put a link to your website at Reliable Roofing where folks can learn more about you and your organization as well in the show notes so that people can stay in touch with you. But again, I wish you the best going forward, and I want to thank you for your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.